Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I will be finally ranking on a tier list all of Denis Villeneuve's films. He's one of my favourite directors and I haven't gotten around to doing his movies yet because I was waiting for Dune Part 2 to come out, which I finally got to see over the weekend. So now we have all 11 of his feature films here to rank. Yeah, he's pretty much like the new kind of Christopher Nolan, I guess, because he just makes these big gigantic blockbusters on the scale of like a Christopher Nolan film that not many directors kind of do these days. But in my opinion, he's just as good, possibly even better, especially with his last run of films, pretty much since like Prisoners and Enemy came out in 2013. But he does have a few earlier films that he did that I think are like Canadian language films. So they're in here too. I've seen all of them, and yeah, so we'll just get them ranked in the order that they're here. So first up we have probably one of his lesser known films, and that's Polytechnique from 2009. This is actually a really good film. I enjoy it quite a bit, and it's one that most people haven't seen, but I actually have it on Blu-ray, so I like it quite a bit. It's quite a dark movie. It's a true story of a school shooting that happened in Montreal, I think. And it was this guy that came in and shot all the women that were studying there because he didn't think that they should have been there. So it was quite a dark film. It's shot in black and white. It was also shot in English as well as its original language at the same time. So they'd shoot one scene in its original language and then they'd go back and shoot the exact same scene in English rather than dub it, which is pretty cool. So you can watch it in both languages too. It's a very dark movie. Obviously, anything based on a real-life school shooting or university shooting or something like that, it's going to be quite dark. But it is a good film. It kind of shows the aftermath a little bit as well, but it also isn't a long film. It's like only like an hour and 15 minutes long, so it's an easy kind of quick watch film, though it's not easy as far as its subject matter goes, but still I really enjoyed it. For what it was, I'm going to give it a B because it's a solid film. Next we have Maelstrom. This is one of his earlier films from 2000. I watched this a couple of years ago. I just thought it was okay. I didn't think there was anything amazing about it. It's probably my least favorite of his films, though, to be honest. But it wasn't garbage or anything like that. It was just very bland, and there wasn't anything really that caught my attention too much. It was probably his most dull-looking film as well, and least memorable as well. But at the same time, I didn't hate watching it while I was watching it. It just didn't really scream out that this was kind of going to be some future director to look out for at this time. But the movie was just okay, so I'm going to put it in the C tier because it wasn't, like, to be honest, it could be a D tier film even, but I'm going to put it in the C tier because it wasn't too bad. It was just very average. Next we have Incendies. This is another of his earlier films. This is probably his most well-known film before he started doing English language movies. This came out in 2010, and I think it may have even won or been at least been nominated for like the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film. And it's a pretty cool film. It's pretty intense. It's very dark. Most people would say it's his best early work. I actually prefer Polytechnique still over this one, but it's definitely a solid B tier film. Has some very intense moments like the bus scene that everyone talks about, as well as the twist ending that's quite shocking and revealing. But overall, it is a good movie. It's very solid, and this is one of those movies where it does kind of point to a upcoming director who's got more to offer. So that was kind of the era when his career, I guess, began to turn, and he was able to make bigger films that were seen by more people. But yeah, it's a good movie. Next up, we have Enemy. This is a super underrated film, in my opinion. I really love Enemy. It doesn't get enough credit. A lot of people put it at the bottom of his list, saying it's one of his worst films because they don't understand it and stuff. But for me, it's just a super engaging psychological thriller film, and it kind of reminds me almost of a Hitchcock film in some ways, just because it's like a character study of this person who's struggling and not really all there because he's, visualizing kind of a twin, or you don't know if it's really a twin, this person that's like his double that's showing up and stuff. And it kind of just, along with the really cool musical score as well, kind of something about it just reminds me of like it's a modern Alfred Hitchcock film or something. But Jake Gyllenhaal was really great in both roles. It's definitely deserving of at least an A tier. Like, to be honest, I could even put it in the S tier, but I'll just put it in the A tier for now because it's a really great movie, and I highly recommend Enemy. If you haven't seen it yet and you are a fan of his more recent work, I definitely recommend going to check it out. It is very different. It's a much smaller budget, low scale kind of film with few characters, and there's no like big action scenes or anything like that, but it is a really good, solid psychological thriller that makes you think a lot. Next up we have Dune Part 1, which came out a couple of years back now. This is the opposite of Enemy, whereas it's a really big blockbuster film with a whole ensemble cast, and it's kind of the first piece of this looking like it's going to be a trilogy now. I think it was originally just going to be a two-parter, but now there's going to be a third film made on the second book, which is pretty cool. So Dune Part 1, I remember seeing it in cinemas a couple of years ago and really enjoying it, having a lot of fun with it, being excited to see what would happen next. I have watched it since on Blu-ray as well. I do really like the film quite a bit. I really like big blockbuster science fiction films that are kind of a bit grounded as well. Like they're not just all chaos and crazy and like completely different from, you know, what we would visualize our world as in the future. And I think that's what's cool about it. But the cast is great. It hints at some things that are going to be picked up on in the sequel, which I got to see, which was really cool. But as the first piece of this franchise, it does its job really well. A lot of people say it's too long and boring, and there's a lot of talking scenes and things like that, but I never found it too long or boring or anything like that. So it's another A-tier film for me. It's not quite an S-tier film, but it is very good. Next up, we have Prisoners. This was the first film where I was introduced to this director. I remember seeing it in cinemas back in 2013, and it was a rainy, wintry day, and this film is a very dark, depressing thriller about, you know, some fathers who have lost their daughters, and they've trapped this kidnapper. They've kept holding him prisoner, who they think has kidnapped their children, and it's a very dark and gritty and brutal film, very sad and depressing as well. But at the same time, it's an excellent movie because it's a fantastic thriller that just gets you super involved in it. The characters are very believable. They're very well acted. Hugh Jackman's so intense. Jake Gyllenhaal gives one of his best performances here. Paul Dano is just really creepy. He's really good at doing those kind of performances. The movie looks great. It was shot immaculately. Like, the film just looks incredible. And the musical score was great that went along with it. It just gets under your skin as well, because I remember after watching this film, it's just being in my head for a long time and just putting me in this kind of headspace or mood after watching it, because it just has that kind of effect on you when, unlike a lot of other films you'll just watch and kind of think, oh yeah, that was cool, we'll forget about. Prisoners doesn't do that. It really kind of stays with you, especially that first time I saw it in cinemas. So it's definitely an S tier. It's still my favorite of his films. It's not really at the top of most people's lists, but I think it's his best film so far, in my opinion. So next we have his very first film, which I think is called August 32nd on Earth. Came out just before Maelstrom. This movie is kind of like a indie road film. I didn't like it that much, but again, I'd say it was about equal to Maelstrom, probably a little bit better. It was a little bit more interesting. The cinematography looked a bit nicer. It was a bit more involving than that film, so I'm still going to put it in the C tier, but above Maelstrom. I do remember thinking it was okay, especially for a first film from a director. You don't often expect much. Some directors come out swinging with like a great first film, but this one was okay. Like, it was better than his second film, and you know, there was nothing like awful about it or anything like that. So yeah, not much to say about it though, to be honest. Next we have Sicario. So I was excited to see this film in 2015 because obviously I'd just come off of seeing Prisoners and Enemy, and we get a new film from him, and we get Sicario, and it's a really good, intense action thriller film with Emily Blunt, Josh Brolin, and Benicio del Toro. Some great action sequences, especially at the ending. The scene with Benicio del Toro at the rich family's house, that was really intense and really cool. The film was shot really well. Like, the cinematography looks great. The musical score's great. Obviously, the border crossing scene that everyone loves and talks about was really cool and intense. I don't think it's his best movie, but I think it's definitely another A-tier film. So these A-tier films are very good movies still. I really like all of them, and I actually have them on Blu-ray, so that tells you that I really like them. But I just think that they're not quite as good as Prisoners and another film that I'll put up there soon. But yeah, they are really great films still. So Sicario was really good. Even its sequel was pretty good. It wasn't as good as the original, but it was still decent. So next we have Arrival. This is another science fiction film that's more grounded in reality because it's on our Earth. It's not like too far in the future or anything like that. It's just kind of how we'd react or respond to aliens coming, and it's more about the communication between humans and aliens. And but the thing that makes Arrival really great, I think, was the twist at the end that kind of builds throughout the film, but you're not sure where it's going until the end, and then it has this really hard-hitting emotional core to it that kind of takes you out of left field, and you don't really expect it, and it kind of hits you hard, and it does it really well. And it's a film that I've enjoyed more each time that I've watched it, and it's definitely another solid A-tier film for me. I'll put it above Sicario even. Next up we have Blade Runner 2049. This is another excellent film. I'm going to put this straight up in the S tier because I think this is one of his best movies as well. Blade Runner, the original 82 film from Ridley Scott's an excellent film. I really love that movie. And making a sequel so many years later is normally risky, and normally it doesn't pay off too well. You very rarely get a sequel to a classic film that's as good as the original, if not better. But this is actually one of those movies where I think this film is even better than the original. Harrison Ford's great once again, but of course the additions of like Ryan Gosling and Jared Leto and Ana de Armas, like the film was just excellent, and it had that style dripping from it that the original film has, but from a modern, big budget looking standpoint. You have a great musical score that kind of harks back to the original score as well, but making it something new. So it's not really just trying to remake the old film. There is new elements and new storylines that continue from the original one, as well as new storylines throughout. And it's just an excellent science fiction action thriller film. Like, it's pretty much perfect as far as you'd imagine a Blade Runner film being as good as this. Like, it would have been really hard to actually visualize a Blade Runner sequel being this good before this movie came out. So yeah, it's an excellent film, S-tier film all the way, definitely. And last but not least, we have Dune Part 2, saved for last. So the movie that I just saw a few days ago now. Was really excited to see this. I really liked the first film, and the first film ends on a cliffhanger, or not really on a cliffhanger even, it just ends like abruptly, and kind of leaves you like thinking, oh well, that was half a movie, so we've got to get the other half, and now we finally have it a few years later. And yeah, it's a really good film. It delivers on all the promises the first film made. It ups the ante a lot. There's more action and more like sandworm sequences and things like that. There's a lot of returning characters as well as new characters, and you know, Timothée Chalamet was great here. He really showed some character development from the first film to this one, as his character kind of changes through, mainly from the second half of this film. But it does up the stakes, and it's a great looking film. It's another really big, epic kind of movie. I'm going to chuck it in the A tier as well, but just above the first film. And yeah, like Austin Butler was great, a great new addition to the film. We got small roles, added roles as well from like Christopher Walken and stuff, and that was cool too. This film kind of ends, like it ties things together more, but also leaves it open for a third film, which is obviously what they're going for. So it was really cool to kind of wrap this first part of the story up, and I think as a two-part film, it works really well. And yeah, I think it's slightly better than the first film as well. So I was quite impressed with it, and it's another solid A-tier film from Denis. So that's yeah, you might be a bit surprised having Enemy above those movies, but I just really love Enemy. But anyway, so that's all his films, feature films that he's released so far. Obviously, I think they're obviously planning a Dune 3, as well as like I think at this point there's like a Cleopatra film that they're supposed to be working on, and another sci-fi movie. So it would be cool to obviously see more from this director in the future years, as he is one of the best working directors at the moment. But yeah, I love all of the S and A tier films. Like, they're all excellent movies. I have them all on Blu-ray. Well, I will get Dune 2 when it comes out on Blu-ray. Polytechnique in the B tier I have as well. Incendies was really good. But yeah, the only ones I wouldn't really recommend would be his first two films in the C tier. But other than that, like, everything he's done is pretty solid. So definitely check some of these higher ones out if you haven't seen them yet. Let me know your list down below. Please subscribe, guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.